Yeah, interesting thing about Sylvester. Anyway, he got tried for his crimes, and he was locked away in prison, but he escaped in 1944, and he was never heard from again. Yeah. Another mystery. We'll have to talk about that one someday.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're at the end. The reassurances that I wanted to give people, I think we've talked about. A, that they weld the lines together now for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And they are doing that, A, to make it a more comfortable run.
Chick-choo.
B, because people can't sabotage the line.
Well, not in that particular way. They can still sabotage the line.
But yes, they can't do it the way that we've talked about. And
Yeah.
C, it actually makes the line itself overall more structurally sound. Therefore, it reduces wear and tear.
Yeah.
So that's a really big reason why they do it.
That's a good reason.
The other thing that we talked about that is a reassurance for folks is that the connections between cars today are engineered to withstand a force at 90 miles an hour. In other words,
trains don't ever go.
oh yeah, they do.
Well,
I mean, not often.
if we start building high-speed rail, hey.
Yeah, but then those
But
trains are reinforced.
Trains
more.
do go 60 plus to 70 plus miles
They don't
an
go
hour.
90 though.
But they can, but the point is,
Yeah.
they are built to withstand the strain put on them at torsion. Torsion is the word I'm looking for, while moving at 9 miles an hour. So they're not going to break, which is why they are so much safer and we don't get the crazy pileups.
So take trains, guys.
So trains are still safe, just like planes. I really, really swear they are.
Yeah, they are.
I
He's
swear they
making
are.
when
a
they
crazy
crash.
face, so I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Well, let's get on to the fun details, the last little bits and bits that we have.
The parts that you all skip over.
Yep. So don't go ahead because we have little things in here that we need to talk about. You need to be aware of. So no skipping this time. It is, of course, ThinkingSidewayspodcast.com. We're going to have the episodes to listen to and download there. We have transcripts now. We got some folks helping us with transcripts again. So we got transcripts on there. Also, we have research links for each episode, a couple of them per episode on there. We also have the option on the right-hand bar. We've still got merchandise available. We've added a bunch of merchandise.
We have.
And we also have a couple of ways to donate to the show if you want to. This is totally optional, but there is the option of using Patreon, which is patreon.com/thinkingsideways, which is a reoccurring donation per episode.
Yep.
Totally up to you and not required in any way, shape, or form. Or if you want to do a one-time, you can totally do that as well. That is available through PayPal.
Super appreciate donations.
You guys have no idea how much that saved us. I do want to talk about the fact that everybody has probably figured out by now we're talking to you from the future.
The future!
But we had
past,
a
actually.
bunch of issues with downloads in the past being slow or not working, and then we had the server problems, and things were a giant mess, and we got a lemon. We were sold a product that didn't work, and I apologize. But by the time this has come out, I've been working hours on end so far. We've almost got it all squared away. Everything should be fine. Thank you for being patient with us.
Thank you.
And at this point, if we've got it figured out right, we should never have this problem again.
Ever.
Which we said last time.
I know.
This time we have it on good authority from some other podcast that people like that we listen to sometimes.
Yeah, they're always asking why. Okay, let's move on to the other stuff that we've got here. You're going to be listening to us through iTunes. A lot of people are still doing that. You can find us on there if you do subscribe and leave a rating for iTunes and all other streaming sources. Our podcast feed did move. So if you are noticing issues with it not updating with the current stuff and you see this stuff on social media or on our website, you may have to unsubscribe and resubscribe because those things sometimes don't always catch the update. So just so you know that. But I said streaming. We're streaming on, well, just about everywhere you can stream at this point. So use whatever tool you want to use. And by the way, if you can review us on those, that'd be awesome too.
We like
Cool.
those.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Are we on Twitter?
We are on Twitter, where you
Twitter?
cannot stream us.
No.
But on Twitter, we are Thinking Sideways.
You can see some awesome memes and some Tumblr stuff and also lots of pictures of trains.
Yes, and fake pictures of Devin.
I'm Devin. I run the Twitter. So if you like me, you should follow us on Twitter.
suddenly turned into a popularity contest.
We hit more than 2,000 followers this past week.
Oh, really?
Cool.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Good job, Devin.
Thank you.
Is all of your memes. I've actually
know.
started using the memes
I know
everywhere.
you have.
I'm badly using them, and I'm trying. The other places that you can see us use memes would be on Facebook. We have the Facebook page and the Facebook group. So both of those, the page has a lot of content. The group is where everybody gets together and does their discussions about different bits from episodes and just whatever we all find interesting.
Yeah.
We have the ability to receive emails. The emails would come through Gmail because it is thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. You have feedback about an episode, you have an episode suggestion, or you have questions or concerns about something. Please, the immediate answer is to send us an email and let's talk about it. Usually there's a very simple answer. Rather than folks sometimes get upset and they will post a comments on our website or things like iTunes, and then it's hard to have the conversation because they're buried in that mass of stuff.
Yeah.
So send us an email first.
We like talking to you. Also, don't forget we have a subreddit.
We do.
It's Thinking Sideways, not Thinking Sideways Pod. You can find us. It's not super active, but there are episode discussions that happen sometimes, and the more users we get there, the more active it'll be.
So if you're a Reddit user, that's a place to hang out, and the more of you that are there, the more it's going to be active. It's like our Facebook page. That thing was super slow forever and a day, and then suddenly there was a whole grip of people, and now it's constantly busy. So
Someday.
I can't think of anything else that I have to tell anybody. Can you guys?
I don't want to talk in ears anymore. I'm done.
You don't want what?
Talking to people's ears anymore.
Okay, I can accept that. So Devin's done talking into your ear, so we're going to go ahead and end the episode. So until next week, woo-hoo!
Stole my line. Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Hey guys, Steve here. You are listening to one of our original 26 episodes. If you've listened to any of our new episodes, you're going to notice that we're sounding a little different in these ones.
Yeah, there's a reason for that.
There is.
They've been remastered
They have been remastered.
because they had a really annoying hum.
Yeah, I mean, a huge thanks to listener James for doing almost all of the legwork on this
Yes,
thing.
yeah.
You'll also notice if you had listened to what we're calling the Lost 26 episodes before, and you're re-listening now, the music and sound effects are gone.
Yes, we've gone back to straight audio. So be warned, we sound a little different today than we do in what you're about to listen to.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thinking Sideways.
I don't understand.
Does not compute.
You never know.
Insufficient data to formulate a reply.
Stories of things we simply don't know the answer to.
Well, hi there, and welcome to another episode of Thinking Sideways. I'm Joe, joined by
Steve.
and
Devin.
Hey, so here we are again for another hard-hitting, so anyway. Okay, this is a little bit of an unsolved mystery. Today we're going to talk about the Surcouf. The Surcouf, for those of you who don't know about it, was a French submarine that disappeared supposedly in the Caribbean, although some people argue differently. But the Surcouf was a submarine that was built in France in the late 20s, early 30s. It was built in the late 20s. It was launched in 1929 and commissioned in 1934 into the French Navy. It was the largest sub ever built at that time. It's about 360 feet. It's about the same length as a Los Angeles class nuclear sub today.
Can you give us a reference that isn't a submarine?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Well, what do you think? It's longer than a football field.
Okay.
Yeah.
So big.
That's helpful.
Yeah,
That's
it's-
actually very helpful.
Friggin' big. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we're building much bigger subs these days. The biggest sub ever built was built by the Russians. It's actually the Soviets, the Typhoon. It was the sub that was in The Hunt for Red October.
Oh, yeah.
560 feet long.
Wow.
That's gigantic.
Yeah, it's enormous, and yeah, so that's the biggest one ever.
Not the one that jumped. That's not the Hunt for Red October one
no,
that jumped.
that was not. Yeah, that was
Jumped?
not. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, in the Hunt for Red October, they come up for air, and it's like they jump,
Oh,
and
yeah,
you know
reaches.
where that sub is.
Yeah,
Yes, I got it.
that was a Los Angeles class sub,
Okay.
a lot smaller. So, but at that time, it was a big honking sub, and it had to be big because it had to do so much. I mean, it wasn't just doing what ordinary subs do, which is go around and torpedo ships. It also had a big turret on the top of it in front of the conning tower that had 2 8-inch guns in it, and so it was like basically kind of like a battleship. In a
I was going
sense.
to say 8-inch guns. Those were destroyers at the time. Had guns that were almost that size.
Yeah,
didn't they?
yeah, and so
So it's like a ship that is also a submarine, or a submarine that like can glide across the
yeah, it's like
surface?
well back in those days, really, up until the invention of the snorkel in the 40s, most submarines were really designed and built to run on the surface most of the time, and just submerge when controversy occurs, like say enemy aircraft shows up and they want to like torpedo you and kill you, and so that's a good time to submerge maybe.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
but back in those days they spent most of their time on the surface. So anyway, besides having these big honking guns and a turret in front, they also had a hangar aft of the conning tower that contained a float plane, and obviously it was a skinny little hangar, so they had to pull the wings and stuff off of this thing to get it stowed away. I can't imagine what a nuisance that would be. Imagine it's like, okay, guys, get up on deck and pull that thing out and put it together, and
Take it back apart.
Didn't
Yeah.
they say, I don't remember how long it took, but they were talking about in the research how long it took for it to dive and how it made it just like obscenely impractical for like, being able to make it get away from anything.
yeah, you want to be able to dive quickly, and it took like over 2 minutes to dive.
Yeah.
to get to 40 feet.
Yeah.
To just 40
Just
feet.
a
Yeah.
tiny little bit.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I was trying to do a little research on that because that is an extended dive period, and I was wondering if perhaps it lacked a negative tank, because typically diesel subs that we build, I don't know if it's the same for all countries or not, but we build ours with negative tanks, and a negative tank is a tank that when you surface, normally when you submerge, you blow the negative tank out, but when you surface, you fill it up with water. The idea being is it gives you negative buoyancy. When it's time to flood those tanks, it pulls you under quicker.
Got it.
Yeah, and so once you submerge, then you blow the negative. This thing perhaps lacked a negative tank. I don't know, or perhaps it had a really kind of a pathetically small one.
No, they were just busy like trying to pull things in and
Yeah,
Well, I remember reading about the size when we're talking about how big it is, and maybe this is why it didn't have an adequate tank. It had a area to hold 40 prisoners. So I mean, that's
it had a brig.
yes,
Yeah, it had a
its
brig.
own brig
Yeah.
that holds 40
Oh, my
prisoners,
goodness.
which is huge on a submarine.
Oh yeah, well, I'm sure they were stacked in there like cordwood.
Oh, but
Yeah,
but that's a lot of
still-
space.
That is a lot of space on a submarine. Yeah, I'm sure they probably made good use of it for storing food and stuff like that. Like food and wine. These were French sailors after all,
Yeah.
so they had to have a wine cellar.
Yeah,
inside.
wine and cheese.
Yeah.
Why did it have the airplane again? Because I remember there was some specific reason that there was a plane involved. Because that's not what you'd normally have on a sub.
Actually, back in those days, a lot of subs did carry float planes. It wasn't that unusual.
But wouldn't they just use radar?
Yeah, they didn't have radar back in those days.
Oh,
so,
okay. Oh,
and,
that's right.
And
There we go.
sonar was not that well developed either. So in order to find targets, like say ships and stuff like that, they would launch their plane. The plane would go buzz around and find something, and then come back and tell them, or radio back.
I
and
guess it
vector
seems
them.
like just such a backwards way to like be doing all this stuff, right? It's in that in-between period where they're like, okay, we have to be able to do these things, but we don't have the technology. So I know, we'll just strap some guns on it, strap a plane on it.
I know.
And we'll just see where it goes. It just seems so like kind of just a bad idea.
Yeah.
Bad design.
Yeah, I would imagine that in reality, the plane, for example, would probably not be pulled out of the hangar very often.
Sure.
But can you imagine what a huge nuisance it would be? And you're very vulnerable. I mean, if enemy aircraft do show up while you're, say, dismantling the plane, well, you're just going to have to like leave the plane and dive.
you just
I mean,
And they were going to make, I think this was the first of 7 of these that they were planning to make. Is that correct?
Yeah, the plan was to build a series of them, but and this was the first one. And they built this thing because the Washington Naval Treaty placed limits on naval construction, but submarines were omitted from that. So they built this big honking thing, which is basically they called it a submerged cruiser or something.
Oh, okay.
No, excuse me, they called it an underwater cruiser. But
So it's a
basically,
loophole.
yeah, it was a loophole. They were exploiting a loophole. They said, well, if we can build this thing that's kind of like a frigate or a battleship.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's totally what it is, right? It's a battleship. It can hardly submerge. It's just like on a technicality, it has to be able to submerge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and the flaw, when I was doing the reading on this, is the flaw is, okay, well, it's gigantic, which is awesome. We've got this giant sub, it's the biggest one ever made, and it's got these massive guns, but because they were on a sub, which doesn't sit that high out of the water, these guns were supposed to be able to shoot, I believe it's 15 miles, is how that's an 8-inch gun could shoot. But
max range on these guns was 24 miles, but unfortunately they were not able to see 24 miles.
Right, so they could only shoot, I think it was 8 or 10 or something like that?
It depends. Yeah, they had like a station where they could sight from the top of the conning tower, and that gave them a range of, I believe, 8 miles. And then if they used the periscopes, they could get a little higher up and so they could see further away. That gave them a range of about 10 miles.
I like that they had to use the periscope.
I know.
And then, above water.
But in theory, if they wanted to go to max range, they could launch the float plane. And then the float plane could actually guide them in.
Guide them in. It was again, it's an awkward way to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have this, so we'll do that, and well, we don't have that, so let's just try this. It just seemed cobbled together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and this is possibly, apparently it looks to me, I mean, if you look at the thing, if you look at pictures of it, it looks really top heavy for a submarine. And there was talk about it behaving very badly in rough seas, rolling really badly. And that could be one clue to the mystery of the whole thing as to what happened to it. It's like, and we'll get into theories about what happened to it, but I'm thinking that it's quite possible that if they just tried to submerge in rough seas. I was like, you noticed earlier I had my old submarine manual out?
Yeah, I was flipping through that.
Yeah, I wanted to confirm something that I remembered from reading it long ago, but apparently submersion of a submarine, center of gravity and the center of buoyancy cross one another. So essentially, when you're on the surface, your center of gravity is above the center of buoyancy. And then as you submerge, the center of buoyancy moves up. If you can imagine a line moving vertically through the submarine.
Okay.
And eventually it winds up, center of buoyancy winds up above the center of gravity. But at that point where the 2 points meet, the submarine becomes very unstable.
Oh,
so
okay.
if you
Right,
got
because
this,
it's just like a roly-poly, right?
Yeah. It's not like a surface ship where, if you list to one side, it sets up a righting arm and tends to push you back.
Right.
It's not like that. And so that's even a possibility that possibly, and I'm getting ahead of myself because, but what the hell?
But it's all in the size and the build of this thing, so it makes sense.
Yeah. So I could see the possibility where it's just bad luck. They're submerging in rough seas and they hit that point of instability, and
they get hit by a big wave.
They get hit by a big wave, and I don't know if you guys looked at any pictures or diagrams of the submarine.
I looked at some, yeah.
The 8-inch guns are fed by this vertical magazine, and the ammunition is stored at the lowest deck of the submarine. And so it's like, and so I'm sure that formed part of the ballast of it, putting all that, because that 8-inch ammo's got to weigh a ton.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Those are big shells.
Yeah, and so that's kind of something I was curious about. It's like, they obviously weren't able to replenish. They were actually out doing stuff, shooting at things and stuff like that, using up their ammo. And I don't think they had a supply line back to France, which was occupied by the Germans by this time. So what happened down there? Did they think to put counterbalancing weights down there, or did they have trim tanks that could flood?
So it might not have had the weight that they were expecting to counterbalance. I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself though. Okay, so we talked about the issues that she had. She rolled badly in rough seas and took a long time to dive. So back to the history of the ship a little bit. So she served in the French Navy, but the Germans invaded France in May 1940. The Surcouf. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. All of our French listeners, write in or call. Yeah. She was in Brest being refitted, and I don't know where Brest is, but I assume it's on the coast of France. So at that point, she left and went to England and stayed there being refitted in Plymouth, England. And then in July, the Brits launched an operation called Operation Catapult. And I'm not going to go into all the specifics of Catapult. It had to do with a lot of French ships being either coming over to our side or being scuttled. But in the phase of it that affected the Surcouf is that all French ships that were in port in Britain and also in Canada were boarded by armed Marines, and basically the crews were taken off them, and most of them were repatriated to France. And then the idea was that these ships and submarines, whatever, were going to be turned over to the Free French Navy under, the Free French guys. Remember Charles de Gaulle and all that stuff.
And I'm guessing the idea, however misguided here, was that if there's any French who are on the ship who have been turned by the Germans for whatever reason, that you get them off so that the ship doesn't become a threat to you while you're quote unquote using it in your service.
Yeah.
Would that be a correct assumption?
Yeah. And so the French, after the Germans took over, the Vichy government formed, and they were basically kind of, what's the word I'm thinking of? A puppet government of the Germans. And so, the question was, these sailors, where did their loyalties lie? And so they just decided to take them all off ships and send them back to France, and then they turned them over to the Free French Navy.
I love that. That's one of my favorite stories in history, right? We couldn't trust some of you, so we're going to condemn all of you and just take all your stuff.
Yeah, I know.
Just bye.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Good idea.
I had a fun time. Yeah, and actually, this is kind of sad, but almost the entire crew of the Surcouf was sent back to France on a hospital ship, which was unfortunately torpedoed and sunk by the Germans.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so that caused a little bit of bitterness between the French.
Way to go.
Yeah, I know. And the other thing that caused a little bitterness is that actually the Surcouf saw during Operation Catapult, it actually saw a little bit of gunplay on the sub, and 3 Brits and 1 French sailor were killed during the boarding of this, which again caused a little bit of bitterness. In August 1940, the Brits completed the refit of the ship and then turned her over to the Free French Navy for a convoy patrol. As you know, there was a lot of convoying going on between America and Britain, and also America and Russia, and so.
Between the Allies, essentially.
Yeah, essentially. So convoy escorts were kind of necessary. There was only one officer who had not been sent back to France, to be torpedoed and killed by the Germans, and that was Commander Georges Louis Blaison, I think. I don't know.
That sounds right. It sounds right. Yeah.
So he became the new commanding officer, and then a bunch of French sailors for the Free French Navy were put on board her, and she was assigned to convoy patrol. But at the same time, there was still a bit of an atmosphere of distrust between the Brits and the French.
So hang on. Before we go any farther, I've already see a giant issue here, which is she had been running for a year or so with a crew that had learned and knew about the ship, and then they're all jettisoned off of this ship, and an entirely new crew is put on, and then she's put back out to sea.
Yeah, I know. That's
with a bunch of guys who don't know how exactly to do everything.
Especially since she's so problem ridden, right? I mean, she is prone to toppling. She's got all these little problems.
Submarines are complex machines too, and I'm assuming, that at least a strong percentage of these people had served on submarines before and had some clue what they were doing. You gotta hope. But it's again, if this is a one of a kind sub, she was the only one of her design that was ever built, which means that every ship has its own idiosyncrasies. So you got to know how to deal with them. Yeah.
So if you got guys who, you got to do this, you got to do that, but suddenly they're all gone.
Yeah.
You don't know what to do, so you don't know if you're doing something right or wrong, which can make for a catastrophic situation.
Even in the most perfect submarine. right?
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
and this one had another problem too, which was that it was in Britain, and obviously, if they needed spare parts, well, I'm sorry, French, they're back in France, which is occupied by the Germans.
Right.
So you gotta they're not gonna obviously set up a whole manufacturing infrastructure to make parts for this thing.
For just one song.
Yeah, they're not gonna do
So
that.
we're saying it's even more cobbled together at this point, right? All the repairs
Yeah.
that are being done, all the
Baling wire
retrofitting.
and duct tape.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I'm sure that there's a lot of pieces and parts that could be made from scratch by a qualified machinist and stuff like that, but it would be time consuming.
Yeah.
Also, this is the war. Like, why?
Yeah, I say in a sense it's kind of like a mystery why they even press this thing into service. It seemed like an accident waiting to happen. So, but anyway, there was still a little bit of tension there. They had a new commanding officer and a new crew. There were accusations made that people on the sub were spying for Vichy France. The Brits apparently also claimed that the Surcouf was attacking British ships, because when you think about it, when you're in a convoy in the North Atlantic, then, and the convoys are kind of spread out. And so it would actually not be that tough if you're like one of the escorts to just go ahead and sink one of these merchant ships.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you could do that. It wouldn't be that tough. You could just sink a merchant ship, and it's like, hey, what happened to him? I don't know. The Germans must have got him. Well,
Yeah, but I got everybody on board would have to be on board with that.
yeah, so the Brits actually as part of this, they stationed a British officer and 2 sailors on board, supposedly to be liaisons, but more likely just to keep an eye on them and make sure that nothing like this happened. So anyways, the Surcouf went to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and basically escorted transatlantic convoys until 1941, when she was damaged by a German plane, and then went to the U.S. Naval Shipyard at Portsmouth, New Hampshire for a refit, and then went to New London, Connecticut, and then went back to Halifax. Meanwhile, what happened is Pearl Harbor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor. So they decided to send the Surcouf to the Pacific Theater, and so she was given orders to sail to Sydney, Australia, via Bermuda and Tahiti and the Panama Canal and all that stuff. So she was going to have a neat little tour, and I could just imagine that. I've read conflicting stuff according to some accounts that I've read about this. At the time that she set out to make this voyage, she only had one functioning engine.
What?
Yeah, I know. I can't believe that. I cannot believe they would have put her to sea for a voyage like that with one functioning
That's
engine.
a long trip.
So I am taking that with a grain of salt.
Although I guess it wouldn't be so surprising given that, nobody really could get their hands on the correct parts.
Yeah, that's a good
Right.
point. I mean, it's like, but it seems to me rather dangerous to send a ship to sea with only one functioning engine.
Yeah, although I guess you say, you kind of hedge your bets at that point, right? You say, well, you've only got one functioning engine, but it would take us like 5 years to actually get the parts we need in every fabricator or whatever, or a year,
yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
But, there's, 400 fairly disposable dudes on this ship.
It
And
wasn't
the ship is also pretty disposable. So I mean,
what
either
the hell? Yeah.
either they make it and they're helpful, or they don't. But we tried.
Yeah, I
don't know.
I really think the proper course of action for this ship would have been to run it not too far distances for very long until that second engine craps out, and then just scrap it and use that steel to build other stuff on the battleships or something like that.
Or just scrap it.
Yeah, that would have been that too.
Yeah, that just doesn't make any sense. It would be as if I were going to take a road trip in my car, but I've only got first and second gear.
Yeah.
That's essentially it. Oh,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to drive 1,000 miles, but it's going to take me weeks. An hour. It's foolish.
Yeah,
nobody
it is.
Nobody in good conscience would do that.
Yeah, it is. And frankly, this thing was designed with an inadequate number of engines anyway. And that probably gets back to things like, if you're going to have a big turret, the float plane, and a big brig that holds 40 prisoners, well, you gotta make up that space somehow.
Cut somewhere.
Well, but the fleet submarines that the U.S. built in World War II had 4 diesel engines in them, and you guys have seen the Blueback. The Blueback
Here in Portland, yeah.
The Blueback has got 3 diesel engines in it. And
And it's not even, how big is, and it's not
Blueback
that
is
big.
219 feet long.
Yeah.
And so, it seems to me that 3 is the minimum, really.
For something that size,
Yeah,
absolutely 4 is probably needed.
Yeah, I got a chance to take a tour of a Russian Foxtrot submarine, and that's a pretty small, dinky sub compared to this thing, and that had 3 diesels on it. I mean, it's like 3 is a minimum. But design constraints are submarines are. There's a huge design constraint, which is that total volume equals total displacement, which is not the same as for surface ships, where displacement is smaller than the actual volume of the ship. And so there's only so much space on that thing. So I assumed to do things like put a brig in, you had to cut out a diesel engine or two.
Or, what is it, the null tank or the
negative tank?
Yeah,
the negative
Just cut
tank.
that out.
I like the null tank.
The null tank.
don't
Yeah, I
need
like
it.
the null tank. Yeah, who knows? Maybe there is a null tank. You would, if you
Maybe
look,
that's where it went.
if you look at the tanking diagram of a submarine, you'd be amazed at how many tanks there are on a typical submarine. So where were we? Oh yeah. So anyway, so they decide to send Sarkouf to the Pacific Theater. So she left and went to Bermuda, where she resupplied, and then headed south from there to go through the Panama Canal. I guess southwest, technically.
like you do.
Yeah, that would make sense. And headed southwest. The plan was to go through the Panama Canal, stop off at Tahiti for a little resupply, and then on to Sydney. So she never made it to the Panama Canal. She disappeared somewhere between Bermuda and the Panama Canal.
Huh.
Yeah.